The story begins in the principal's office of a school, where the principal informs a student that others have raised concerns about his admission. They questioned what good it would do to have a student involved in a scandal among them. As the boy was aware, starting from last year, the children of political and business insiders began flocking to the school, with over 200 people requesting transfers. The principal had to turn most of them down, but made an exception for this boy because he trusted the boy's father's integrity and had faith in the boy's abilities. The principal assured the boy not to take it the wrong way, but urged him to clean up and get ready before his first day. The boy promised to do as the principal instructed. In class, a teacher entered and grew angry with the students for not doing their homework. He then informed them that there was a new student and asked him to introduce himself. The boy said his name was Gunwoo from Hanam. The other students remarked on how cute he was and wondered if he was the kid involved in the admission scandal. The teacher told Gunwoo that there was a seat next to the class president, Hyeon, and instructed him to sit there from now on. Hyeon wasn't feeling well at that time. A boy teased Hyeon by calling him a loser and saying he was the lucky one. The teacher asked everyone to be quiet and instructed the boy responsible for cleaning to clean the board and prepare for the class. As the class ended, Gunwoo remarked to Hyeon that Seoul schools had a lot of students, and then he greeted him. Hyeon told Gunwoo that if he wanted to be there, he should avoid contact with him. Other students came to greet Gunwoo. One of them asked if Gunwoo was the son of the congressman who had been in the news recently. Another inquired about the holes in Gunwoo's ears, asking when he would get them pierced. Yet another asked if Gunwoo had moved to the city with his father. Gunwoo responded that he didn't quite understand what they were talking about but was pleased to meet them all. Just then, another boy came by, asking about the transfer process and noticing Hyeon still sitting there. The boy asked why Hyeon was still there. Hyeon looked scared and said he was leaving. The boy criticized Hyeon's rudeness and questioned whether Hyeon thought he could stay out of sight just because there was a new student. The boy then kicked Hyeon, saying that Hyeon was like a thorn in his side and that he shouldn't think the boy would let him off the hook just because of Gunwoo's arrival. He then asked Hyeon if he wanted to spend the night in the garbage incinerator. Some of the others commented that it sounded like fun. Gunwoo apologized to them and said he was trying to have a conversation with his deskmate, so he asked them all to leave for now. One boy asked if Gunwoo knew what Hyeon had done. Gunwoo replied that he didn't care, but he wanted them to leave Hyeon alone. He then told the troublemaker to find his seat before Gunwoo made him. The boy took this lightly, but he and his friends eventually left. Gunwoo extended his hand towards Hyeon and suggested that while it might just be nerves, they could both use something to eat. He asked if Hyeon knew where to find some snacks and offered to treat him. Hyeon hesitated, but Gunwoo took him along. The leader of Class 2 heard about Gunwoo from Hanam and wondered where he had heard that name before. In the canteen, Gunwoo bought some food and drink, and as he saw the different types of coins used for the transactions, he wondered what kind of money it was, having never seen it before. Gunwoo then asked Hyeon if that wasn't so bad. Hyeon inquired how much Gunwoo knew about their school. Hyeon explained that a very famous person attended the school, the son of the vice president of the Songmyung Group, one of the top 3 richest companies in Korea. Originally, the school was notorious for having many troublemakers and violent students, and several teachers had quit because they couldn't tolerate the environment. However, things changed when the heir to Songmyung began attending the school. Hyeon wasn't sure if this was entirely true or just a rumor, but people said that as soon as the heir arrived, he visited the principal and proposed introducing a new culture to the school. This culture involved gambling. The boy secretly created his own currency and circulated it around the school. Each coin was worth about 100 won and was valid only within the school. To distribute the coins, he first gave them to the bullies in each class. By using these coins, he encouraged the entire school to start gambling, and before long he had total control. There was a lot of resistance at the beginning, but once the coins started to be used like cash throughout the school, instances of violence decreased, and even the teachers turned a blind eye. Gradually, the boy accumulated even more power as children of wealthy and influential business and government elites transferred to the school to associate with him. The boy's name was Tae, the third-generation heir of the Songmyung Group conglomerate. 7 children of Korea's most powerful political and business leaders were part of his entourage, and their group now held all the power at the school. Gunwoo expressed surprise that the principal hadn't mentioned anything about this when they spoke, and his father hadn't mentioned it either. He then asked if the reason Tae called Hyeon a backstabber was because Hyeon tried to stand up to the group. Hyeon replied that when Tae arrived, all sorts of depravity became normalized violence, cheating on tests, and gambling. It wasn't just the students, even the teachers had sold out and were slaves to money and power. As Hyeon spoke, he began to cry and expressed his hatred for the situation. He wondered why anyone would come to the school and learn if all they cared about was power and corruption. Gunwoo agreed with him. Just then, Jumo, the leader of Class 2, arrived. He remarked that it was amusing to see Gunwoo's performance and questioned why they were talking behind his back. Jumo demanded to know if they wished to die. He scolded them for causing trouble by reporting him to the Ministry of Education, and now he felt he could step out of line because he was the class president. Jumo made it clear that he wasn't finished with Hyeon yet. Hyeon trembled at Jumo's words. Jumo then told Gunwoo that his name seemed familiar, and he remembered why. When Gunwoo was a child, he had traveled around Hanam and even to Seoul, where he fought and defeated many kids. Jumo recounted an incident where Gunwoo had knocked someone out cold. He then asked Gunwoo if it was true that he had broken up the BK alliance in Seoul, and that rumors claimed one punch from Gunwoo could send someone straight to the afterlife. Jumo noted that this was why Gunwoo was called the first fire from Hanam City. Gunwoo responded, asking Jumo to shut up and expressing his dislike for that nickname. Jumo stated that the only thing that mattered was that Gunwoo was that boy. He then offered Gunwoo a chance to join Tae. Jumo speculated that Gunwoo must have transferred there after hearing about Tae, and he assured Gunwoo that his entire world would change once he joined them. He then showcased his clothing, which was high-end and cost $500,000. Jumo explained that this was now just money, and if Gunwoo worked for Tae, he could rig his grades and smoke cigarettes without any issues. Once they got to know each other a bit better, they even hit the clubs and had fun with some girls. Then he talked about the old man of Gunwoo, a famous politician, and questioned why Gunwoo wasn't partying in style with them and Tae. Gunwoo realized that Jumo was the class idiot and that there was nothing good about that school. The students wandered around, burning cigarettes and gambling like it was nothing, and they even had different money there. Gunwoo took Jumo's cigarette, telling him that he wasn't the type to bow down and do someone else's bidding. He then threw the cigarette away and told Jumo not to act cool by dragging on a cigarette, saying he wasn't interested in anyone's pretense. He instructed Jumo to ask someone else for attention. Jumo got very angry, but controlling his emotions, remarked that Gunwoo was amusing. He noted that there were always people like Gunwoo who didn't know what was good for them, those who thought they were tough and wrote checks their bodies couldn't cash. Jumo then trying to punch Gunwoo. But just then, the teacher intervened, asking what was happening and telling Jumo that he wouldn't hit anyone around and instructing him to retract his hands from the new student. Jumo retorted that Gunwoo was lucky and that he would soon realize that even the old man couldn't touch him, so it would be interesting to see how long Gunwoo could maintain his tough guy act. Jumo then asked if Gunwoo wanted to play a game. Gunwoo inquired if Jumo was referring to the coin game they had played in the classroom, but wondered how he would play without any coins. Jumo responded that there were plenty of people eager to cash out their coins, and if Gunwoo was too scared to play, he should just back off. Gunwoo replied that if he could get his hands on some coins, he wouldn't see any reason not to participate. Hyeon thought that Gunwoo might not be able to take up Jumo's challenge. Jumo insisted that it was just a game and suggested they meet after class. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, students discussed Jumo's challenge to Gunwoo, the new transfer student, and felt sorry for Gunwoo, who seemed likely to be in trouble on his first day. As Jumo and Gunwoo faced each other, Jumo made it clear that Gunwoo had agreed to the game of his own free will and not to back out or make excuses later. Gunwoo agreed. Jumo placed some coins on the desk and explained that the game was also known as racing. In this game, players place 5 coins on a desk and then slap the desk with an open hand. A player wins if they make all the coins flip so that they all face in the same direction. There were 2 main differences between this game and the usual slap game. First, only the coins provided by the school could be used. Second, the winner of each round could raise the stakes by any multiplier they chose. If a player failed to pay the increased amount demanded by their opponent, the sum would become a debt. Jumo warned Gunwoo not to think of running away without paying, as there was a system in place to ensure all debts were settled one way or another. Gunwoo remarked that Tae must have a lot of power. Jumo agreed and wondered why Gunwoo had mentioned that. Was he scared of losing? Jumo also noted that the game was all linked to a large corporation, which added to the stakes. Finally, after Jumo explained all the rules to Gunwoo, he suggested starting each hand with about 100 coins. Gunwoo asked if he could multiply that by 5. They all looked confused, and Hyeon calculated that it would amount to around $50, and after 3 rounds, it would be $150. Jumo questioned if Gunwoo was trying to act tough, and whether he could handle it. Jumo bet that Gunwoo wouldn't last 5 minutes. Gunwoo asked if Jumo was playing slowly and dragging things out for hours, or if he was actually scared. Jumo, irritated by the question, told him to start. As they decided who would go first, Hyeon felt something was off. It was Gunwoo's first day, so how could he pick fights with the class bully so casually? Gunwoo won the draw and told Jumo to watch him closely. He promised to prove that Jumo was wrong and that money and power weren't everything in this world. Jumo explained that even if he lost a round, there was always a chance to turn the tables in the next round. He also mentioned that he had raised the stakes to 5 times the original bet and assured Gunwoo that he didn't need to worry about him backing out. Gunwoo, however, insisted that since it was his first time playing the game, he would go first. He added that he had never seen anyone play on the desk without using books for air pockets and wondered if it was too much to ask to use a book. Jumo replied that if they played with a book, he would have robbed Gunwoo in 5 minutes flat, so they were sticking to the original rules. Gunwoo remarked on Jumo's kindness with a hint of sarcasm. He then slapped the table but only managed to flip 4 of the coins. Onlookers commented that Gunwoo hit the table harder than they had expected. Jumo teased that Gunwoo must be trying to smash the desk or something, which was scaring their audience. As Jumo prepared for the first round, he slapped the table, failing to flip the coin he aimed for. He noted that he almost had them all and prepared for the next round. In the next round, Gunwoo slapped the table and managed to turn all the coins. Jumo dismissed it as luck and called for the wallets. 3 boys came forward, introducing themselves as wallet number 1, 2, and 3. Jumo instructed each of them to quickly produce 500 coins. While 2 of the boys complied, Jumo turned to the third and asked why he hadn't paid. The boy explained that his mother had told him she would give him his allowance next week. Jumo questioned if the boy was saying that his wallet was empty. He demanded a timeout from the game and asked the boy what the problem was, insisting that he didn't want to look bad in front of the new kid. Jumo reminded him that he had instructed them to always carry at least 50,000 won worth of coins. Jumo then struck the boy with a chair in his frustration, questioning how he could be so irresponsible and still be considered one of Jumo's wallets. He found it unacceptable that the boy didn't have any money. Gunwoo intervened, blocking Jumo's attempt to hit the boy. Everyone was shocked by Gunwoo's action. Jumo asked what Gunwoo was doing and if he thought he was some kind of hero. He told Gunwoo to drop the act. Gunwoo said that Jumo should be asked what he was doing. They were in the middle of a game, and it was clear that Jumo had already run out of money. Jumo retorted, questioning if Gunwoo needed glasses and insisted that he was just teaching them a lesson. As Jumo tried to reclaim the chair, he found he couldn't move it, realizing that Gunwoo had used only one hand. This made him reconsider Gunwoo's strength. Gunwoo took the chair and told Jumo to get back to the game and sit down. He then turned to Hyeon and asked if he had any coins that Gunwoo could borrow. Hyeon confirmed he did and handed a coin to Gunwoo, who thanked him. Jumo instructed Gunwoo to sit, and as Jumo took his seat, it was his turn to raise the stakes for the next round, doubling the bet. Gunwoo noted that doubling the bet meant it would be 1,000 coins, which sounded interesting to him. As Gunwoo slapped the bench, it flipped over, and Jumo remarked that Gunwoo wasn't too shabby. Now, Jumo was raising the stakes 4-fold. A boy mentioned that the amount Jumo was betting was equivalent to the money he spends at the internet cafe in a whole month, 200,000 won in total. Jumo slapped the bench again and turned all the coins, declaring that this was what he had been talking about. He felt he was finally getting into the rhythm and asked Gunwoo if he wanted to raise the bet or not. Gunwoo declined, prompting Jumo to ask why. He argued that Gunwoo wouldn't win anything substantial by playing it safe and that he was hitting his stride. Jumo insisted that there was no chance for Gunwoo to pull off an upset unless he raised the bet now. Even if Gunwoo did manage to win a round, Jumo wouldn't hesitate to raise the stakes tenfold. Others were shocked, realizing that 500,000 won was an enormous amount to wager, and one of them might end up broke in the blink of an eye. Hyeon felt frustrated but was helpless in the situation. Gunwoo commented that the situation made less sense the more he thought about it. He continued playing along with Jumo, believing that there might be some truth to all the talk about leaders and whatnot. It was hard for Gunwoo to understand why someone like Tae would even associate with a small fry like Jumo. Then Gunwoo suggested changing the stakes. This caught Jumo and the others off guard, and they wondered why Gunwoo wanted to make a change. The situation suddenly felt more serious for Gunwoo. Jumo told Gunwoo not to joke around and insisted that changing the rules mid-game wasn't allowed. Gunwoo responded by explaining that he had realized he didn't have much cash on him. If Jumo won, Gunwoo wouldn't be able to pay and would end up in debt, which would remain unchanged. However, if Gunwoo won, he wouldn't take Jumo's money. Instead, he would get one clean hit. Jumo was puzzled by this. Gunwoo clarified that, regardless of the stakes Jumo chose, whether he won or lost, all he wanted was one hit. He asked Jumo for his opinion on this offer. Jumo questioned if Gunwoo was serious whether he would prefer to hit Jumo rather than take his money. No matter how high the stakes were, Jumo was confident he wouldn't lose. Even if he did, he had nothing to lose. Gunwoo couldn't possibly have known that Jumo had rigged the entire game, controlling the table with a remote. He thought it was impossible for Gunwoo to know about the rigging. How could he have figured it out in just 10 minutes of playing for the first time? Jumo wondered who would have ever imagined that he had altered the table into a magnet that could interfere with the coins. Gunwoo asked what the holdup was and urged Jumo to make a decision. He noted Jumo's nervous glances and started to feel impatient. Gunwoo questioned if Jumo was scared and, if he didn't want to accept the offer, suggested they end the game and let Gunwoo lose. Jumo found this irritating. He felt that Gunwoo was just talking because he was about to lose and wanted to escape the situation. Jumo was not going to let Gunwoo get away easily. Even if Gunwoo accused him of rigging the game, Jumo planned to act as if he had no idea what Gunwoo was talking about. As long as Gunwoo didn't see the remote, the situation would end there. If Jumo could get a handle on this, it would finally give him access to Tae's inner circle. He accepted the deal and declared that he was raising the stakes 100-fold. Others were stunned, realizing it meant 5 million won. As Jumo slapped the table, he warned Gunwoo that he had brought this upon himself and should be prepared to face the consequences. As Jumo slapped the table again, not a single coin flipped over. The group was astonished by this development. Gunwoo remarked that from the moment Jumo explained the rules, he had suspected something was off. Jumo was not as clever as he thought. The rule that allowed the loser to raise the stakes as much as they could afford seemed designed to give them a chance to come back and win big. However, if one person consistently won, the loser's pride would compel them to keep raising the stakes until they were broke a clear scam. What made the situation even more suspicious was the slapping of a bare table without any books. Anyone with 2 eyes and a brain would find this odd. Gunwoo had slapped the table extra hard during the first round and noticed that it felt thicker than usual. When Jumo was putting on his show with the chair, Gunwoo took a closer look and discovered a thick slab of metal wedged between the top of the desk and the drawer. Hyeon wondered if everything was rigged. Jumo, annoyed by Gunwoo's constant interruptions, questioned what the point was and why he should care about the person who originally built the desk. He then demanded to know what Gunwoo expected him to do about it. As Jumo spoke, Gunwoo threw 2 screws at him, explaining that they were large enough to have come loose with a real coin. Jumo was shocked and others were puzzled by what Gunwoo was implying. Gunwoo had loosened the screws under the desk so that the magnetic panel wouldn't work. When Gunwoo slapped the bench, all the coins flipped, breaking the bench and leaving everyone in shock. It was clear that Jumo had lost the round. Hyeon thought that Gunwoo had truly beaten Jumo. Despite Jumo's intimidating reputation and the fact that no student or teacher could challenge him, Gunwoo had managed to win fairly, even with Jumo rigging the game. Jumo, astonished, wondered how Gunwoo had defeated him with just a single slap and questioned why he had allowed the stakes to be raised 100-fold. Gunwoo then asked if Jumo was going to collect his prize and promptly punched him. The next day at school, students were buzzing with news that Jumo had been removed as the leader following the game and Gunwoo had taken his place. When someone asked if this was true, considering Gunwoo had only been there for 1 day, Gunwoo entered the class and announced that he was now the class leader. He made it clear that his one condition was that there would be no more gambling in their class from that day forward. The scene recalled the moment when Gunwoo had punched Jumo, sending him staggering backward. Gunwoo had told Jumo it wasn't the right time for him to challenge him and suggested that if he were in Jumo's place, he would be contemplating how to explain his trickery with the desk to everyone he had deceived. A boy wondered what the two of them had been discussing. A girl suggested checking the desk. Others realized there was something inside the drawer that looked like a machine. A student mentioned that he had thought Jumo was a master at slaps, which is why he played on the table, but now they understood it was all rigged. The crowd demanded that Jumo return the money they had lost due to his cheating. Afterward, as Hyeon walked with Gunwoo, he apologized, expressing regret that he couldn't be of more help. He had hoped for a change in the situation but felt powerless when it came down to it. Gunwoo replied that it was never worse than asking a victim, who had already suffered more than their fair share, why they hadn't done more to help themselves. Gunwoo assured Hyeon that he completely understood and that it was not wrong to simply try to survive when things got tough. He encouraged Hyeon to wait for his opportunity to make those boys pay. Hyeon thanked him for the support. Gunwoo then inquired about who he needed to talk to in Class 8. Hyeon explained that rigged games and scams were typically handled by the leaders, but such cases were rare. When a leader caused trouble, it was usually managed by one of the 7 members of Tae's group, specifically a girl named Yuri. Hyeon led Gunwoo to the classroom where Yuri was present and introduced them. Gunwoo thanked Hyeon, who cautioned him to be careful. Everyone in Tae's group was elitist and looked down on others, which could make it difficult for Gunwoo to engage with them. Gunwoo remarked that there should be no hierarchy among classmates. That night, Jumo was in a group chat where others discussed Gunwoo. Jumo complained that Gunwoo was really starting to irritate him and questioned why Gunwoo, on his very first day, was telling everyone what to do. Choi told Jumo that Gunwoo was completely out of line and then asked if Jumo had heard anything from Tae. Jumo denied it, saying that Tae wasn't even reading his messages. Choi mentioned that Tae was backing off from him. Jumo assured Choi that he was fine and that no one had said anything about the rigged game yet. He doubted that Gunwoo would manage to report him to Tae, considering Gunwoo was just a son of a discharged congressman. Jumo saw this as his opportunity to deal with Gunwoo before he could go to Tae. He was confident that Gunwoo would have a change of heart once they broke both his legs. Before Tae transferred there, their school had been the toughest, and no one dared challenge them in a fight, even among schools as far away as Incheon. With a group of boys, Jumo headed to the basketball court where Gunwoo was already waiting. Gunwoo remarked that Jumo was right on time and seemed eager to introduce him to his friends. Jumo agreed and bet that Gunwoo would remember these guys for a long time. Gunwoo asked if Jumo thought it was nice and mentioned that he had something fun planned for the evening. Jumo demanded to know what Gunwoo was talking about and was still confused about what was going on. He was convinced he wouldn't walk out of there alive that night and taunted Gunwoo for not even having Tae backing him up, suggesting that Gunwoo should stop acting tough. Gunwoo had humiliated Jumo in front of many people, and Jumo felt he couldn't let Gunwoo get away with it. Gunwoo then approached Jumo, preparing to punch him. He made it clear that he had no intention of letting Jumo off with just one punch. Gunwoo warned Jumo to remember his words: anyone who lost to him would have to pay up, and whatever they owed would just add to their hospital bills after Gunwoo was done with them. He declared it was time to deal with the arrogant prick. Meanwhile, Yuri was hiding behind a wall, intrigued by what Gunwoo had claimed to have in store. She was curious enough to show up, but now she wondered if Gunwoo had transferred there for a specific reason. Tae had warned her not to mess with Gunwoo, noting that he was the son of a disreputable congressman. Yuri was puzzled by this warning and decided to keep a close eye on Gunwoo. She then saw the texts Tae had sent her, adding to her curiosity and concern. In the battle, Tae had defeated everyone, and Yuri arrived in the middle of it, expressing her surprise. She admitted that she hadn't believed it at first, but Gunwoo had truly handled everything on his own. Jumo and his crew were no pushovers when it came to fighting. Gunwoo remarked that he had initially thought they would be a joke but was impressed by how well they could take a beating. He wiped the blood from his mouth and expressed concern that he might have gone over his budget of dealing with them. He left the remaining matters to Yuri. Yuri, visibly annoyed, told Gunwoo that she wasn't his personal assistant. Jumo was stunned to see that they had all lost to a single person and asked Yuri if she was aiding Gunwoo. Yuri explained that she hadn't wanted to come, but felt compelled to due to Jumo's desk trick. She tossed a letter towards Jumo, which informed him that he was dropping out. She told him, for his information, that the reason for his expulsion had already been prepared. They had decided to overlook all the extortion, assaults, and other offenses he committed during his time there, as they didn't want to tarnish the school's reputation. He could still attend school for 2 weeks after signing the letter, so he might want to consider himself fortunate. He told her not to joke around and demanded to know the meaning of his expulsion. He argued that he was the one who had been assaulted, so why should he have to drop out? He even suggested suing Gunwoo. Yuri told him to be quiet and sign the letter. She reminded him that he had no say in the matter and that his foolish antics had embarrassed not only her but Tae as well. She informed him about an account opened on April 27th at Songmyung Bank in his mother's name, which belonged to him. The account held 4,183,281, which she knew was where they had stashed the money from the scam. Yuri instructed him to turn in the letter by the next morning. She emphasized that they were doing him a favor by not having the principal expel him outright. After that, Yuri walked with Gunwoo and asked if there was anything else he needed from her. He agreed and thanked her. She mentioned that the situation was quite unusual, which is why she had helped him, but normally, Hyung-soo from Class 9 handles the rigged games and scams. She advised him to speak with Hyung-soo in the future. Gunwoo responded that the situation was more systematic than he had anticipated, with different people responsible for various tasks, and he wondered if Tae was trying to turn the school into a casino. Yuri then inquired about the reason for his transfer. Gunwoo did not reply, leading her to wonder if he was intentionally avoiding the topic. He admitted that he didn't know what to say and barely knew anyone there. Yuri told him not to play dumb, noting that his father was Congressman Dahn and had faced accusations. As a result, Gunwoo had to leave his STEM school. She suspected that he knew about the rumors that Songmyung Group had reported his father and inferred that it wasn't unreasonable to think that someone like him might transfer to seek revenge against Tae. She had also done a bit of background research on that day. Back to the present. Yuri arrived and asked everyone to take their seats. The students were surprised to see her and wondered what a member of Tae was doing in their class. They also speculated whether Gunwoo and Yuri knew each other already. Shocked, Hyun took his seat as well. Yuri then announced that Gunwoo would be the new class leader. The students murmured in confusion, as Gunwoo had only been there for 2 days, and they questioned what was happening. They also wondered if it was true that Jumo had dropped out. Yuri clarified that, from that day forward, Gunwoo would handle all class responsibilities and instructed anyone who wasn't present to inform her. She also warned that if she discovered anyone responsible for the magnetic table incident again, she would track them down and teach them a lesson. That was all she had to say. As Yuri was leaving, she overheard Gunwoo telling the students how ridiculous it was that Tae had given him authority to manage the class. He questioned how this role differed from that of a class president. The president of Yibor class was Hyun, so it was only fair that Hyun represented the class. Gunwoo announced that from now on, he would listen to Hyun, support him to the best of his abilities, and respect his prerogative. He also declared that there would be no gambling allowed in their class. The students were confused by this announcement. Gunwoo continued, stating that while he would not interfere with other classes, gambling would be prohibited in his class. If anyone was unhappy with this, they would have to challenge him to become the class leader. He emphasized that he was willing to fight for this stance, whether it was about gambling or any other issue. Angrily, Yuri closed the door behind her as she left, mentioning that Gunwoo could do whatever he wanted, but she would ensure he understood the consequences of his actions. The scene then shifted to the garbage area, where a boy was on the phone. He complained that Yuri didn't know what she was talking about, describing Jumo as insignificant. He mentioned that Gunwoo only became class leader because of a desk he had made for him, and that it would be rude to betray the boy. He questioned why they would even consider quitting after all the money they had made from their class. He assured the others on the call that once they got rid of Gunwoo, everything would be theirs, and he promised to come up with a plan that would ensure their victory. The boy assured Poong that they could keep all the money they made from the deal, which wasn't a bad offer. Poong wondered who this guy was, questioning why he was suddenly calling with such nonsense and why he didn't take the opportunity himself if it was so certain. The boy replied that he hadn't expected Poong to react this way. He had called because he believed Poong was the right person for the job and wanted to know if Poong was interested in earning some cash. He mentioned that times were tough since Bud had started interfering, and he would give Poong some time to consider the offer. He expected to hear back from Poong with a positive response. Angry, Poong questioned who the man was. At school, Gunwoo was writing something when he heard a tapping sound. Looking around, he saw students hiding their phones under their desks while playing games. Gunwoo asked why they were hiding their phones, especially since there wasn't any teacher around. Hyun explained that they didn't want Gunwoo to notice, and aside from the gambling at school, there were also online games they could play, like the notorious snail racing game. The online betting game that everyone suddenly started playing involved betting on one of 3 snails. The snails raced, and players either won or lost based on their bets. It was popular because it was easy to play. Gunwoo wondered if this was the online game everyone was so caught up in. Even if he tried to ban it, he doubted he could crack down on every individual player. He found the situation quite fascinating. He stood up and remarked that, although it was his first time attending school, he couldn't understand why everyone was so obsessed with gambling. Yan guessed that people saw it as an easier way to make money compared to studying for a degree. He then asked Gunwoo to clarify if he really meant it was his first time going to school. When Hyun inquired about elementary and middle school, Gunwoo replied that he had not attended either. Just then, a student opened the door and informed Gunwoo that the dean wanted to see him in the teacher's lounge on the first floor. Gunwoo was puzzled about who the dean might be. Yan explained that the dean was responsible for student affairs and was notorious for being a strict enforcer of school rules. He added that the dean had been supportive of Tae's efforts to combat the gambling culture at the school. Yan asked Gunwoo if he thought the dean wanted to talk to him because he had banned gambling in their class. Gunwoo shrugged and replied that it was hard to say. In any case, even if everyone was still gambling on their phones, it was quieter than the previous day, and it felt more like a real school. Hyun agreed and continued with his tasks. As Hyun was working, a boy approached and punched him, asking if he was happy now that he had someone to talk to. The boy criticized Hyun for not addressing the real issue, how they had ended up in a situation where they had to hide their games in the first place. The scene then shifted to the boys' washroom, where Palm was using his phone and wondering what Gunwoo meant by banning gambling, especially since he was a new student. Other boys were there, and one of them mentioned that, as soon as Gunwoo replaced Jumo, he had banned gambling for their class, causing Yuri to leave in a rage. Elvish suggested they should wait and discuss their next steps before confronting Gunwoo, and decide what to do about the problem they were facing. Palm wondered about the plan that would ensure their victory. He recalled the message on his phone urging them to step up and take down the new kid. A boy arrived and remarked that the offer wasn't bad. He noted that Jumo had earned 700,000 won just from his slap scams alone. If they could make some money while taking down the new kid, they had nothing to lose. They believed it would be easy, and once the scam was exposed, a boy kicked everyone, including Jang, out. Gunwoo was walking down the corridor, determined to clean up the school's reputation within a year, putting everything on the line. Yuri and two other girls were walking in the same direction. One of the girls complimented Yuri's lip color, asking if it was a particular brand, while the second girl inquired as well. Yuri replied that her brother had bought it for her and she would ask him about it later. When Yuri noticed Gunwoo, she commented that it seemed like he had finally had some sense knocked into him and that it suited him. She wasn't sure how much he could get away with outside of school, but now that he was there, he needed to learn to follow the rules and stay out of their way. As they passed and put some distance between themselves and Gunwoo, he remarked that he was a bit disappointed. It seemed that snitching to the dean was all that had happened, and he guessed that Tae and his circle weren't as impressive as they seemed. Yuri responded that there was no need to make a big fuss over someone like Gunwoo. Then another girl asked about the new student. As Gunwoo continued walking, Hyun suddenly fell out of the class. The boy who had been with him in class also emerged and declared that it was confession time. He admitted that he had been the one to tell Gunwoo what to do, and was now being a model student by making sure everyone knew. Hyun said he had already told the boy everything he knew and asked what more the boy wanted from him. The boy explained that he had taken out a loan to buy the coins for gambling, and now he was stuck playing trivial games on his phone because of Hyun. Gunwoo then asked the boy what he was doing there. When the boy didn't respond, Gunwoo repeated the question. Angrily, the boy retorted that the school allowed them to exchange cash for coins so they could gamble, and questioned why Gunwoo had the authority to decide whether others could play or not. Gunwoo replied that the boy had been following his instructions, and he had made his position clear. If the boy was unhappy with how Gunwoo was running things, he could challenge him for his position. The boy, still fuming, wondered if anyone who was unhappy could challenge him and questioned what would happen if the whole class was unhappy with Gunwoo. Gunwoo responded that he didn't care what games they chose or how many of them were dissatisfied. Once they reached a decision, they should give it their best shot. 2 days later, a boy approached Gunwoo and informed him that he had selected a game as promised and would be representing their class in a one-on-one match. Gunwoo asked if the boy was indeed representing the class, to which the boy confirmed and then inquired about the game. The boy explained that the game was called Slime Race. He asked if Gunwoo had heard of it. He described it as a game on the dark web with very simple rules. Players had to predict which of the slimes, red, blue, or green, would finish first. There were various ways to place bets, such as predicting which slime would come in first, or selecting the order of the top 3 finishers. Betting on these outcomes could result in larger payouts. Gunwoo arrived at the site and remarked on how it was surprising that the game hadn't been shut down. He then asked why the boy had moved to the front of the class. The boy replied that he would explain soon and asked why Gunwoo hadn't purchased any tokens for the race in the meantime. He mentioned that this time, they were allowing others to join as spectators and assured Gunwoo that the match wouldn't be affected by their presence. The boy had moved to the front of the class to ensure that everyone was aware of what was happening. He emphasized that it was important for Gunwoo to be taught a lesson in front of everyone for it to have any real impact. Gunwoo remarked that it seemed the boy had put a lot of thought into this. As they prepared, the boy explained that the rules for their matchup were simple. After 10 rounds, whoever had won the most tokens would be declared the winner. To ensure fairness and transparency, they would select a judge to track their picks and the token amounts. Since the boy didn't want to be accused of cheating, he suggested picking a fair judge. He then called Hyun to be the judge. Hesitant at first, Hyun eventually agreed after the boy insisted. At the start, Gunwoo had 1,120,000 tokens in total, while the boy had 5,900,000 tokens. Both presented their picks and wagered their tokens. Hyun noted that Gunwoo had bet on the blue slime to win first, wagering 100,000 tokens. The boy, on the other hand, had placed bets on the first, second, and third places with his entire 5.9 million tokens. The boy taunted Gunwoo, saying that word had it Gunwoo was in trouble with Dean, and on top of that, was in bad standing with Tae and his group. He warned Gunwoo that if he lost, he would have to give up his position as class leader, leaving him with nothing but trouble. Gunwoo estimated that it would take roughly a year to deal with Tae, and he thought his chances of succeeding were less than 10%. He wondered if this was what gambling felt like. Finally, the first game started. Hyeon thought his only task was to confirm how well each participant was doing and how much Yan had wagered. If his guess was correct, Yan would be the minimum if he won 10,000 won each round. Given the difference in funds, even if Yan were to bet only 10,000 won each round, he would still end up with 5.8 million won. On the other hand, for Gunwoo to win, he would need to quintuple his money by betting 100,000 won on blue coming in first, and Yan would need to place bets on the 6-time payout. As the race progressed, they found that the green was the front runner. Other students commented that red seemed to be gaining a second wind. Hyeon thought that Yan had bet on all three. The results showed red winning, and Yan realized it was over as he collected 30 million won from the first round alone. He reminisced about the past when he had won 1 million won, reflecting on how he had to work hard at a low-paying part-time job for a month to earn that amount. In contrast, in gambling, he earned it in just 2 hours. Following that, he got involved in Jumo's rigged games, which earned him and the others 100,000 won a day. But then Yan started losing in other games, eventually losing all of the money he had, including the 800,000 won his mother had given him. Desperate to recover his losses, he sought to return to where he started, but that would have been possible only if he hadn't been caught by Jumo. When Yan was captured by a man, he questioned Yan about the tests and whether he thought they were bullying him or something else. The man simply asked a few questions, and Yan pleaded for a loan, assuring them that he would repay it quickly. They agreed to lend Yan 3 million won, but they never heard back from him. Crying, Yan explained that he had provided his parents' account information and their IDs, and had even opened 2 savings accounts at the bank. The boy who had lent him the money demanded repayment, stating that each account was worth only 500,000 won and questioning how Yan would repay the remaining debt. Yan protested that he had been told earlier that it would be sufficient to cover the debt, but the boy insisted that it was not enough and warned Yan that he would need to go to the police. The boy laughed and wondered if Yan truly thought they were playing games with him. He told Yan to consider the situation carefully, explaining that if they were scared of some corporation, they wouldn't be in their line of work. The boy mocked Yan's intention to report them to the police, claiming that if Yan went ahead with that plan, even if the boy were put away, Yan's debt would continue to accumulate. He was determined to collect what he was owed. The boy warned Yan that his family, from his parents living in the IB apartment to his grandmother down south, and all his friends would find out about his debt. He vowed that he would track Yan down for the rest of his miserable life.